Can you think of an example of two foods that might have numerically the same amount of carbs, but they're going to be metabolized totally differently?
So even the same amount of calories, carbs and calories,
Okay.
same amount of carbs. I'm thinking of a fruit, let's say a banana, which might have about 100 calories.
Okay.
Let's compare that to uh, water cracker. Probably neither of them have a whole lot of fat. Neither of them have a whole lot of protein. Probably mostly carbohydrates. In the case of a banana, it's tied up with a little bit of fiber. It'll slow things down a little bit. It's laced with a lot of potassium and other micronutrients that are going to be great for us. Whereas that water cracker could have a little bit longer strands, but there's nothing to slow things down. And referring to that fiber portion, there's not a whole lot of vitamins or minerals in there either. So we're going to just digest it much faster.
In terms of the sugar spikes, the insulin spikes, I feel like now because of CGMs, people are terrified of them, right? Doesn't matter as much if you're metabolically healthy versus if you aren't. If someone's not diabetic, I can just spike all the time, but there's that fine line. Do you have any advice for people?
I read and ask as many questions as I can about CGMs. I've spoken to endocrinologists over at NYU and internists also who have patients who have type 2 diabetes. And yes, if you're diabetic and you have spikes, it's going to be problematic, especially if they're continued spikes. Maybe I should talk about the non-diabetic. And the ultimate question, is a spike problematic? Right? Because in my view, these people using CGMs want to live with almost like flatlining. They do not want any spikes. They just want consistent glucose response. So is any spike inherently bad? The answer I've been getting is no, they're not. It's a natural after you eat. What's problematic is if it stays spiked for a long time, right? You don't want that. You want it to go up and down rather quickly. Now, is lesser spikes better? Sure. But we don't really live in that kind of environment. And the reason I say that is because what's going to be replacing those foods? An example I've been getting from some of these doctors is I'll have patients come in and instead of having, let's say, rice, I think rice for most people spikes them, white rice. Instead of that, they might be replacing that rice with high fatty meats or other things that you're not going to get a spike with, let's say, a ribeye, but you will with white rice. And so what's the trade-off and what is that going to mean towards your health in the long run? If somebody is going to be super focused on the diet, they're like, I'm going to take away the rice. I'm not going to have a high fat meat. Maybe I'll consume kale. I'm giving you a really kind of extreme answer. All right, have at it. Great. If that's the way you want to live your life, then go for it. But rice is quite important in many cultures. It is in my culture. For example, my dad doesn't feel he's had a meal unless he's had white rice with it. And so then the question becomes, have the white rice and maybe pair it with a high fiber component like a black bean, which is perfect. Beans and rice are very traditional in many cultures, or some other food that's high in fiber to slow down. Going back to COVID, we want to flatten the curve. You're going to have a curve. You need to try to flatten it out.
So is it safe to say if your body is designed to handle the spikes, however, the more spikes you have, the more likely over time it's not going to handle them as effectively?
Spikes are normal.
Okay.
Making sure you don't keep them elevated, important. Trying to avoid a constant up and down is good. Let's go back to my rice and bean thing. If you had the rice and beans together, you're not going to spike as dramatically as if you had the rice by itself. That's going to then mitigate that spike. It depends what the baseline is and how intense that spike is. But mitigating it is good. If a CGM helps a person understand that rice and beans is better than just rice, then that's great.